So I want to ask you, how many of you are ready to move on from 2020? Right? Yeah, pick you. And all I know is that 2020 has been this incredible and amazing, also very challenging 2020. And I know that there is a divine purpose in what we've experienced, and I don't know what that looks like yet. I define faith as learning to walk in the fog. And we've all been fog walkers for the last year for sure. And so my intention today is to support you in planting seeds, as I just found out, which is a great theme for the year, and to really walk into a new possibility, into the new year. And one of the things that's been happening for me is I went into meditation around February of this year, and I had this incredible awareness, and that awareness I kept hearing in my meditation was, let's do it differently this time. And I remember hearing that, and I was like, what does that mean? Let's do it differently this time. And there were some personal things that was going on in my life that I really needed to do things differently, and I want you to think about your own life and how you need to do things differently. But I had no idea how global that was going to be, how we were all forced to do things differently, even if we didn't want to do that. And I always think to myself as, we were all like thrown into our rooms for a timeout and a reset, and to really figure out like what is serving us in our life right now and how we can do things differently. So that's been my theme of the year. So think about where you've had to do things differently. So I want to ask you, let's talk about intention and how intention can serve your greater, higher good, and knowing that intention is everything, and without it, you're wandering aimlessly through your life without a plan. So I think that it's really important for us to stop and think about what is our intention as we step into 2021. What is it that you want to walk away with? What aha would you like to have? What is your planting of seeds? Because the universe is a doing machine, and it only knows to do what you tell it to do. So think about that. If you tell the universe what it is that you say yes to, it knows to set you on course for that. It knows that you are saying yes to whatever it is, and our work in this is to tell Spirit, God, Universe, Spirit, which I refer to as GUS, so God, Universe, Spirit, and we move into that by telling the universe what it is that we want. And what I know is that God cannot take away your free will, therefore you have to tell it what you need to do. So today I want to just move into what my intention is. And my intention as a transformational educator, the founder of Seattle Life Coach Training, and also the author of 2 books. And I'm going to be talking to you today about my second book, Spiritual Liability. And what I want to talk to you about is that my intention today is to be a messenger of clarity, and to really have this moment where I'm going to be asking myself and Spirit to put a dent into your consciousness that's going to be a lasting dent that's going to help you rise to your greatest and highest self. So I want to just ask you, if you were to right now to set your intention for today, possibly, for 2021, what is your intention? What is it that you want to tell the universe? What is it that you need to put your yes out to? So right now, just think about wherever you may be, if you're online or you're here at the center, I just want you to take a second, and I want you to ask yourself, what is my intention right now, or possibly for 2021? If the universe is a doing machine, tell it what to do. And I think that intention, like I said, is everything, and without it, we're wandering in our life without a plan. So let's tell the universe right now, what is my intention? And speak it out in your own way. What is it that you would like to experience? What aha do you want to have? How can you put a dent in someone's consciousness? How can you serve the greater, higher good of the world? So as we step into this intention, some of you may not know what your intention is. And so I want to just offer you a thought. And our thought is that I say yes, what is ever for my greater and higher good. And when we do it that way, the universe is going to bring you what it is that is for your greater and higher good. And what I know is that we don't want things that are not for a greater and higher good. So we can release it in that way and say, I'm open, Spirit, to what it is that I need to receive. So I want to just take you further into intention. And intention is that as we step into this, let's go bigger than just the intention of what do I want? What can I get out of my life? It's in that moment, I'll talk about this further, but it's great to have an intention, but let's go further into a global intention, into a bigger intention. Because right now, as you all know, this is the most important time we've ever seen in our life. The world is in chaos. We're in a pandemic. The political system is absolutely is crazy. And we need to go bigger than just ourselves. So I want to ask you this. So what if your intention was to be in spiritual labor, giving birth to your greatest and higher self? Now think about that. That I am interested in, I'm in spiritual labor, and I'm going to give birth to my greater and higher self. And then we're going to birth that gift that you were given at birth. Every single one of us has a gift inside of us, that God-given gift that was put into us as children. And if you remember, for those of you that have kids, you know that every child that came through you and out of you has a different energy. And they're not the same, they're always different. And those are God-given gifts. And the difference between a gift and a talent is that a talent is something that you enjoy and you're drawn to and you had to work at it. And a gift is something that you were born with that just comes natural to you. So if we think about this, gifts are not to be withheld. And what good is an instrument that hides in its case? It's worthless. So we have to get that these gifts that were put into us are God-given, and that if the clarinet is just put into its case and put under the bed, it's worthless. And every one of you have gifts. And so our job is to imagine that we can express those gifts and talents into the world. And I want you to go a bigger thought. The global thought is, think about this, especially now, that if every single person was infusing their God-given gifts into the world, the whole world would rise. That's a huge thought. And it is nirvana. And I don't know if it's possible, but I do know that every single one of you can put a dent in the universe if you step into your God-given gifts. And get that if you're doing your gift and you're doing your gift and you're doing your gift, it's this rotation of energy, and then the whole world rises. It's a really powerful thought. So I want to ask you a question, but before I do this, my second book, Spiritual Reliability, is called Learning to Become God's Employee. So I'm going to be talking about excerpts of my book today. And it's super powerful because the question I want to ask you is, if God was an employer, would you be hired? So sit in that. If God were an employer, would you be hired? And this is the part where we have to understand that, are you spiritually reliable, and are you willing to be utilized for a greater, higher purpose? Because God, universe, spirit, or as I refer to as Gus, and the reason we refer to it as Gus, because everyone has their own God of understanding, and sometimes the word God is triggering. So for the service of the purpose of, let's find your God of understanding, let us meet you where you are, we can call it Gus. So the universe, God, universe, spirit, is looking for reliable workers. And the question that I would ask you is, what if you were to act as God is your employer. And just like an employer who is hired to do a job, God deploys those souls who are spiritually reliable and are 100% committed to the job. They show up with an activated attitude. So I want to just think about this, that if you were hired by a company, your work in this is to be reliable. And the question is that if you're unreliable, it, capital IT, God, universe, spirit, passes you by and moves on to the next person that is reliable. It's no different than an employee or employer. And the question I have is, how long do you think that you'd keep your job if you were unreliable? The answer is not long. So I want you to ask yourself, if God was an employer, would you be hired? So let's go further, and I want to talk to you about God calls. And a God call is a couple things. And now, how many of you, wherever you may be in the world, how many of you are relating to the word God calls? And how that we get called to certain things. We get a calling to do certain things. We get a calling to say something. We get a call to go that way. And so what I talk about is God calls are God whispers. And there's this whisper that's going on in our heads all the time. And it's gut, it's intuition, it's just this knowing within us that we can't explain. But what I do know is that sometimes it comes in whispers, and sometimes it comes in these loud voices. And we have to learn to listen, because that's what spiritual reliability is that I don't know what this means, but I've got to do this. It's meaning that I'm being called to serve the greater, higher good. And I'm not attached to the outcome. I'm not attached to how the results are going to happen, because I'm just the messenger. I'm just the messenger. That's it. So let's talk about ways that I have heard my God calls. So the 4 a.m. wake-up calls, which these are the ones I don't like. So when I was writing Spiritual Reliability, even my first book, It's All in the Sharing, I would be woken up religiously at 4 a.m. Does anyone relate to that? And those 4 a.m. wake-up calls were like, really? You want me to get up right now and I need to download this dream that I just had? Because when I'm writing and I'm in the middle of a project, what happens is that I start getting downloads in the middle of the night. And I hear the whispers. I hear those moments when I'm being called. And my work in this is to really step up and to get up and be reliable and not argue with God at 4 a.m. And 4 a.m. are where it's too early to call someone in LA, and it's too late to call anyone in New York. So what happens is you're left with you and your God of understanding, and that's when it has your attention. So I love my 4 a.m. wake-up calls, because my job, reliably, is to get up, knock out my download, and then go to bed. But I can't do it until I do it. So let's call about more dog. How about God? Well, actually, that's interesting, because dog versus God is backwards, right? So how about these? Think about your own God calls. So the random thought to call someone, to enroll in a class, to buy that book, to go to church today, go a different way to work today. The universe is always nudging us to listen and then be reliable to its whispers. So for example, my company, Seattle Life Coach Training, I teach my students to use their intuition in their sessions by utilizing their gut knowing, their intuition. Because you know when you know something. And so our work in that is to listen to that guidance within us. So examples would be is a coach that I teach may hear something they should not use the tool that they were going to use, and then they need to create and readjust. That's part of the God call. Or ask this question, perhaps the one that makes you uncomfortable. Because sometimes in coaching sessions, we may have an idea or a plan of what we need to do or what questions to ask or what tool to use. And sometimes the universe is telling you, you need to ask a tougher question, because the question that you're asking right now isn't going to move the client forward. And so sometimes we have to have the fierce conversation, which is the one we don't want to have, because that's how people get moved forward. So the key to this is that it's required to move forward in some way. And so sometimes when we're having those God calls, we can argue with those God calls. And we may say, not that. Don't make me do that. That one I'm not comfortable with. But as I know that when we're uncomfortable, it means we're growing. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve. So God calls require two things to be spiritually reliable. And those are, you must be courageous and act with your life force, by either doing something or saying something. Without these actions, nothing's going to happen. So this is the part about spiritual reliability, is that you got to do something or say something. You got to show up where the universe is asking you to show up, to be utilized for that greater, higher good. Let's talk about God winks. So a God wink is possibly, and I think about your own self and how you will relate to this. So a God wink is that song that plays that has a significant meaning to you. You know it, that song that comes on, and you know how it connects to your life. Or an animal, or an insect, or that rock that you find on the beach. Or for me, it's my mom who passed away 11 years ago. And one of the indicators that she's here with me is the numeral 444. And I tell you, every single day, religiously, I look at the clock and it's 4:44. It's not planned. You couldn't make that up. It is. And I always say, "Hi, Mom," every time. She just is giving me a wink. I'm here with you. And it just comforts me. So these are usually, if you think about God winks, are a remembrance of someone, or somehow it's validating you in some way. So think about what your God winks are. So I want to talk a little bit more about intention and raising your intention. And there are two different types of intentions, and one is called a low-level intention, and the other one's called a high-level intention. I want to break those down for you. So a low-level intention is all about you winning and gaining. It's all about you winning and gaining. And your ego is asking yourself, what am I going to get from this? It tends to be selfish and ego-based, and it only serves you. A high-level intention serves the greater, higher good of the world. And your offering is an up level to the world. Your contribution, your service, whatever you're providing, is something the world needs and will help those around you and you rise. So it's not about you all the time. It's about how can I serve the greater, higher good with my contribution, with my service. So your intention to do this and how to make this mental shift is to go from what am I going to get to how may I serve? This is the biggest question. And when you speak out the word, how may I serve, the universe says, thank you. Let me tell you how you can serve me. And the high-level intention or inner reaction, the key to this is that when you have a high-level intention, get this, everybody wins. Everyone wins in the exchange, and it serves a greater, higher purpose. So the bottom line to this is the universe is always speaking to us in many different ways, and it's your job to listen, but the key to this is you have to act with your life. It's like that clarinet I was talking about. You put it in the case, it's worthless. You got to act. And it's again, you're either saying something or you're doing something. And that's the two different distinctions. So I want to just go further. And so a lot of us grew up, for myself too, in religious homes. And mine was ishy. It was like my parents were not religious, but my grandma was really religious. And so she was like Baptist sometimes, Protestant sometimes. Then she was a Lutheran. Then all of a sudden she was Seventh-day Adventist. And I'm not sure what she was up to, but she was like a seeker. And I think she was just moving around trying to find what her truth was. But as a boy, I would go spend the weekends with her, and I was forced to go to church at a very religious Baptist church. And I remember sitting as a boy in those pews, and I remember the preacher was giant, and he would yell things like, "You will be condemned to hell if," and the one that triggered me the most was, "Only the righteous will inherit the kingdom of God." And I hated that. I didn't understand what that meant and how that was so judgmental. And so as I was writing Spiritual Reliability, and I was triggered by that word, I began to do research. And what I learned is spiritual reliability, and the word righteous, is about doing the right thing. And if we break down righteousness, it really means right use. That's the powerful thought. And when I heard that that's what that meant, that I can reframe the word righteous to right use, the whole world opened up to me. Because I was like, that is a lot more open and more global and more free. Because how we can all get that those that use their life in the right ways, think about karma. I mean, think about the ways that you're going to get paid back, right? So that freed my soul. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 8 ways that we can live our life as a spiritual reliable vessel. And it comes from my book, obviously, Spiritual Reliability. So I'm going to break these down to you today, and we're going to talk about each one of them. And hopefully that these will be something you can apply to your life and maybe set those intentions for 2021 and plant these seeds, because that's my intention. So number 1, to become spiritually reliable, we need to ask for divine guidance, and we need to co-create our life with our higher power, your God of understanding. Here's what I know. You can't do it alone. No one can do it alone. And when you're not co-creating your life with your higher power, with something greater than yourself, you're wandering aimlessly through your life without a plan, thinking that you can do it all alone. And so you're wandering in this meager little way, and it's you and your ego moving through the universe, saying, "Oh, I don't need anything. I can do this all by myself." But then the opposite is when you get that the divine is wanting to help you, and again, it can't take away your free will. Our work in this is to invite it in, invoke our higher power into our life, and say, co-create my life with you, God, universe, spirit. And when you do that, it gets easier. You're the vessel, and you're being utilized for the greater higher good, because the divine only works for the greater higher good. Number 2, be willing to be utilized for a greater higher purpose. It's not always about you all the time. There's something bigger going on here than just you. What if I said to you, there's something bigger going on here than just another service right now? What if I said that those that are watching from the world, wherever you may be, that there's a reason why you're watching today, and it's way bigger than what you thought it was? What if I tell my students all the time in class, you know, they're there to get their certification. They just want their certificate to be able to go out and charge people for their coaching sessions. And I look at them and I say, there's something way bigger going on here than just this class. There's something bigger going on here. And I don't know what that looks like for you, but what I know it is for me as your teacher, as a transformational educator in the world, is that when you get that this is not just a class, it's a classroom for the Holy Spirit. And the Course of Miracles talks about this and says that every relationship is a classroom for the Holy Spirit. So every single time we have a relationship and that we are willing to be utilized for a greater, higher good, that's when we get that it's way bigger than just you. You're going to ripple out, and it's going to ripple and ripple and ripple. And you continue to put dents in people's consciousness. Number 3, we operate from a high-level intention to serve, which I've talked about. So one of the ways that we can ask what is a high-level intention to serve is, this is my 2 questions, is does the world need it? And does everyone win? So does the world need it is, I'm going to just throw a thought out there, and you can decide if this is something that works for you or not. You can accept it or reject it. And that is, do we need more pens and plastic materials in the world? I mean, that's one way to go about life, and maybe that's one way to make an income. I get it. But what if our contribution could be an up level? What if it's something bigger than just another pen or something that the world already has? Because again, you have gifts and talents, and if you could bring something that's bigger than you, that the world needs and everyone wins, it changes the game. Number 4. Your contribution to the world is an up level, and you ask yourself, again, I talked about this, how can I serve rather than what I'm going to get? This is when we have to pay attention to the ego. And as you most probably know, that the acronym for ego is edging God out. So our work in this is to watch the ego. And the ego is going to not ask that question. How can I up-level the world with my contribution, with my gifts and talents? And how may I serve rather than what I'm going to get? Because the ego is all about it. It's all about the ego. It's all about wanting something for itself. How can I win? How can I gain? So we're asking these questions, and we're going to watch that moment that we're edging God out. Number 5, big one. Breathe. Get calm. Quiet your mind in order to hear God whispers. So what I know about breathing and getting calm and quiet your mind is that the universe, God, its angels are right here. And they actually have a higher vibration. And so in order for them to reach your vibration, you have to raise your vibration. They got to sort of come down to you, and you got to rise to them. And so to hear the whispers, to hear those moments of how you can serve, you got to figure out how to rise your vibration so then you can meet in the middle. Because they can't come down to this negative energy. It's harder for them. And we need to get that. You can see this as a visualization, you can see this as a truth, but I know that when I rise my vibration through meditation and prayer and yoga and walking and gardening and doing things that ground me, I hear spirit, because that's closer to me, because I'm in a place of power and a place of higher vibration. So number 6, once we breathe and get calm and quiet our mind, then we start hearing, and we start feeling, and we start sensing divine guidance as it arrives. And what we're sensing and hearing and feeling, because we don't always have the same senses. You can call it the senses, right? We have the 5 senses, and some of you have different ways of sensing. But what you're listening for in the concept of spiritual reliability is you're listening for your marching orders. The idea in spiritual reliability, being God's employee, is you gotta act, and you gotta say something, and you gotta show up. And if you don't move and give your marching orders, then again, it is unable to serve the greater higher good. It goes back to that instrument that's hiding its case. So our work is to hear, feel, see, sense divine guidance as it arrives and listen to our marching orders and then act with our life. Act with our special life force that was given to us when we were at birth and we've worked on. Number 7, we got to find the courage to show up where God needs us next. So this is the big one, because for me personally, that when I start getting in my download and I get a divine calling on my life and I'm told what to do, then there's this thing about, no, I don't want to do that. Not that. Don't make me do that. And that's about trusting and having the faith that what you're hearing, it's foggy, is going to be something that's going to happen. It's that bigger thing I was talking about that you don't get. So your work is to step into it and to get spiritually courageous, or sometimes I talk about becoming spiritual gutsy. You're going to just step into it. And one of the things that we have to understand is, again, when we become courageous by doing an action or saying and revealing something, you become the hands and the feet and the voice of God on earth. God utilizes human beings to do the divine work. So I talk about this in my training program. What I refer to this as a blended being. And a blended being is somebody that gets clearly that they are connected to the heavens and they're connected to the earth. And it's, to me, they're not different from me. They're different, but they're not, because I know this about my life, that I am a blended being. And our blended beingness is that, for me, when I pray and I meditate, and the difference between prayer and meditation is prayer is when you ask and meditate is when you're listening. And that's the difference. And the problem is that we can pray all day, but are you listening to the answer? And those answers are coming from the heavens. They're coming from a place that's up here, and then you get the download. That's the blended being. You hear, you sense, you know something, and then you have to bring it to the earth. You have to bring it and do your groundwork. Again, that you're an instrument, you're a God-given gift. So you bring it to the earth and you do your work. The download happens, it comes through you, you sense it, you bring it to the ground, and then you move, you act, you get courageous. So blend your being. Number 8, you know that you're always connected to the divine without interruption, and there's no place that God is not. So I say, even in this, God is. For those of you that know Marianne Williamson, I was in one of her talks years ago, and it happened right after 9/11. And I'll never forget this. It changed my life. And someone got up in one of her talks, or maybe I think it was a workshop, and they said to her, confronting her, basically on this concept, "Oh, really? Well, how is there God in 9/11? Or how is God in an entire family that has been killed by a drunk driver?" And these are hard questions to ask. And these spiritual lessons, or why do bad things happen to good people, are the hardest questions for me to ask or answer as a transformational educator in the world, as an author that does this work. And what she said was profound. And she said, I believe 9/11 happened, and even in this God is because we in that day were all dropped to our knees. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I can tell you where I was, what room I was in, talking to my grandmother, shaking, wondering, oh my God, we're not indivisible. We actually can be attacked. You know, we think that there's this blanket of protection around the United States, and this was the moment we all realized that we're vulnerable. And so she said that was a day that we all were dropped to our knees, and we were all praying together as a community, as a world for the first time. Think about this. That's the moment we all dropped to our knees and we all began to pray together. That is a place of rising our vibration. So even in this, God is. So maybe that's something you need to think about. Like, if there's something in your life that's going on right now, I'm sure of it. I know there's something in my life going on right now that's not always pleasant. And so how could you shift your perspective and reframe it and say, even in this God is, and my work is to give birth to it and seek to give birth to this, whatever it is. And when you do that, and you pray, and then you meditate, and you listen, and you hear, you'll get the answer. Then you got to trust it, because, again, faith is learning to walk in the fog. So while all of this is going on, okay, I make it sound so easy and graceful, and I know it's not. It comes with awareness, and staying awake to what's going on around you. But the thought is that the world of effects are going to spin around you always, but the center of who you are is indestructible. So if you stay in your center from that mental space, nothing can knock you off balance. The center of who you are is indestructible. And when you stay in your center, nothing can knock you off balance. So our work in this as a spiritual, reliable vessel, as a human being in the world, is to stay in our center. Find the way that you can center yourself and what brings you peace. And what I know is that I heard this once. It's always go towards the peace. That is the trick. That is the key to being in your center. Find your peace. I don't know what that looks like for you. For me, it's walking. For me, it's gardening. Actually, I have a weird thing. I like to pull weeds. I don't know why. But when I pull weeds, I get really calm. So I'm not pulling anyone's weeds, but for myself, I like to pull weeds. So this is my invitation to everyone, is I want to ask you if you'd be willing to ask yourself every day, and this is going to take some practice, and for me, this is the truth. When I pull out of bed, my feet hit the ground, first thing out of my mouth is thank you. Thank you for this day. Thank you for another day. And then the next question is, how can I be spiritually reliable right now in this moment? What can I do in this moment to be spiritually reliable? So I want you to ask yourself that. Today, how can you walk out of here and be spiritually reliable with the concepts I've been talking about? Next, how can you use your life to serve the greater, higher good? So this goes beyond the day. This goes about your whole life. How can I serve the greater, higher good? This is your contribution to the world. This is your gift. So right now, as we step into 2021, I'm inviting you in this moment to absolutely ask yourself, doing things differently, how can I serve the greater, higher good with the gifts and talents that I have that were God-given to me? That's going to change the whole game. Because remember, when we're all being that and seeking to give birth to our greatest and highest self in spiritual labor, our work will then rise the whole world. That's going to change everything for you. So the thought is, I'm inviting you to stay awake, stay aware, because the universe is always whispering all the time. It's always giving you God winks. So follow the breadcrumbs. It's going to just take you right to where you need to go. So I want to just ask you if you'd be willing to repeat after me as I close my talk and go into prayer. And this is what I want to have you repeat. All is well in all things, and that includes me and every part of my life. And so it is.